Claire Reynolds leaned her head against the cool metal of her locker, pretending to search for a book she didn't need. Across the hall, Ethan Carter's laughter rang out, effortless and warm, drawing people to him like moths to a flame. He stood surrounded by teammates, his soccer jersey slung over one shoulder, his face lit with a carefree grin that made Claire's stomach twist. "Claire!" His voice snapped her out of her thoughts. Her heart stumbled, but she composed herself quickly, pasting on a smile. "What?" "Party at Matt's tonight," Ethan said, walking toward her. "You're coming, right?" She rolled her eyes. "When have I ever gone to one of your parties?" "Exactly," he said, grinning. "You're overdue. I'll pick you up at 8. He walked away without waiting for an answer, leaving her flustered and helplessly in love. Ethan had always been her best friend, the boy who shared his peanut butter sandwiches with her in 2nd grade, the one who held her hand through her parents' divorce, the person who made her laugh when she wanted to cry. But somewhere between childhood and now, Claire had fallen for him. Deeply, irrevocably. But she was just Claire, quiet, unremarkable, and easily overlooked. To Ethan, she was his anchor, his constant. Nothing more. College came like a wave, sweeping them into a new world. Ethan excelled, of course. Within weeks, he was the star of the soccer team, his natural charisma drawing in friends, admirers, and opportunities. Claire stayed close, content to orbit his world, though the quiet ache in her heart grew with every passing day. The campus quad buzzed with life as students hurried between classes, the early autumn air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves. Claire sat on a bench outside the library, her notebook balanced on her lap, doodling absent-mindedly. She was waiting for Ethan, who had texted saying he'd be late after soccer practice. "Hey, Claire, right?" Claire looked up to see Emily Dawson standing before her, dressed in trendy jeans and a crop top that screamed effortless confidence. Her auburn hair shone under the sunlight, and her smile was almost too perfect. Yeah," Claire replied, sitting up a little straighter. Emily slid onto the bench beside her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've seen you with Ethan. You're close, aren't you?" The question caught Claire off guard. "We've known each other forever," she said cautiously, her fingers tightening on her pen. Emily's smile widened. "That's amazing. He seems like such a great guy. You know, I've been spending a lot of time with him lately. He's so easy to talk to." Claire nodded, unsure of where this was going. "Actually," Emily continued, leaning in slightly, "I kind of like him." Like him? Do you think he's into someone?" The words hit Claire like a punch to the stomach, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm not sure," she said slowly. Emily tilted her head, her gaze sharp but curious. "Really? You guys are best friends. You must know who he's into." Claire hesitated. Her heart screamed to tell Emily the truth, to mark her territory, to fight for Ethan. But her throat tightened. She couldn't do it. Instead, she forced a laugh. "Ethan's always been private about that stuff. Even with me." Emily mused, tapping her chin thoughtfully. "Well, if you hear anything, you'll tell me, right? Girl code and all that." "Yeah," Claire murmured, her smile strained. The conversation ended as abruptly as it had begun, but Claire couldn't shake the awkwardness that lingered. She watched Emily walk away, her confidence radiating with every step, and felt a pang of inadequacy. If she didn't do something soon, she would lose Ethan for good. That night, Claire sat in her dorm room, staring at a blank sheet of paper. She knew what she had to do. If she couldn't say it out loud, she could say it on paper. "Again, there's something I need to tell you, but I don't know how. You're the first thing I think about in the morning and the last at night. I hope these words find you." Her heart ached as she folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope. She decided to try harder, even if her efforts felt futile. The next morning, Claire secretly put the letter in Ethan's locker, without anyone noticing, and then went to sit at their usual spot on the grassy quad, clutching her notebook as Ethan jogged toward her, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder. His hair was damp from practice, a stray lock falling across his forehead. "You're late," she said, not looking up. "Worth it," Ethan replied, dropping onto the grass beside her. "You won't believe what I found." Claire's heart skipped. She glanced at him out of the corner of her eye, trying to keep her expression neutral. "What?" He pulled something from his bag, a folded piece of paper, slightly crumpled around the edges. This. Claire's stomach dropped. It was her letter. Her eyes widened, but she quickly forced herself to act normal. "What is that?" she asked, feigning innocence. Ethan grinned, holding it up like a prized possession. "Someone slipped me a love letter." She let out a forced laugh, her cheeks burning. "A love letter? Seriously?" "Yup," he said, unfolding it dramatically. "And it's pretty poetic, actually. There's something about the way you smile that makes the world brighter." He paused to glance at her, a teasing smirk tugging at his lips. "Sounds like someone has a crush on me." Claire's heart raced. Was that knowing look just his usual charm, or did he suspect? "Well, it's not that surprising," she said, keeping her tone light. "Half the campus is obsessed with you." He raised a brow, his smirk deepening. "Are you part of that half?" "What?" She laughed nervously, but her face betrayed her. "Ethan, stop being ridiculous." "Relax, I'm kidding," he said, though the glint in his eyes suggested otherwise. He tapped the letter thoughtfully. "So, what do you think? Should I reply?" Her throat tightened. The way he asked, I don't know," she stammered, looking away. "Why are you asking me?" "Because," he said, leaning closer, "you're my best friend. Should I humor this mystery admirer or not?" Claire forced herself to breathe. If she acted too flustered, it would give her away. She swallowed hard and met his gaze. "Yes," she said finally. "Yeah," he said, tilting his head, the smirk never leaving his face. "Yes," she repeated, her voice steadier. "I mean, it's someone's real feelings, Ethan. You should acknowledge them at least." For a moment, he didn't say anything, just studied her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then, with a slow nod, he folded the letter back up and slipped it into his bag. "All right," he said casually. "I'll play along." Claire exhaled silently as Ethan leaned back on his elbows, looking up at the sky. She prayed he couldn't hear the frantic beating of her heart. Did he know? Could he tell? That evening, Claire returned to the crack in the old library wall, the place she had chosen as her drop-off point. There, nestled in the shadows, was his reply. She carefully unfolded the note, her hands trembling. "Whoever you are, you have my attention. Tell me more." Claire's lips quirked into a smile despite herself. For the first time, her words had reached him, not as his best friend, but as someone anonymous, someone who could speak her heart freely. And so, it began. The exchange of letters became the highlight of Claire's days. Every note she slipped into the crack in the library wall was a piece of her heart, and every reply she found there was a lifeline back to Ethan. Through the letters, they shared dreams, vulnerabilities, and secrets, things they never said aloud in their usual friendship. For once, Claire felt like she had her own secret piece of him, separate from the world, separate from Emily. One crisp evening, as the two of them sat on the grassy hill overlooking the soccer field, Ethan stretched his legs out and tilted his head back to look at the stars. Claire hesitated, her notebook balanced on her lap. "Hey," she said, keeping her tone light. "Whatever happened with that whole letter thing? Did it go anywhere?" Ethan turned to her, his brow quirking slightly. "What do you mean?" he asked, though there was an unmistakable glint of amusement in his eyes. "You know, the letters," she pressed, trying to sound casual. "The mystery admirer. Did anything ever happen with that?" For a moment, he didn't reply. His lips twitched into a faint smirk as he studied her, making her heart race. "That's my private matter," he said, his tone teasing. Claire frowned. "Seriously? You're not going to tell me?" Ethan shook his head, leaning back on his hands. "Nope." "Why not?" she asked, her cheeks warming. He gave her a lopsided grin. "Because it's none of your business, Claire." She wanted to press him further, but his expression, a mixture of amusement and something she couldn't quite place, made her hesitate. Instead, she forced a laugh and let the topic drop, though her mind lingered on his words long after. The next week, Claire found herself face-to-face with Emily at the campus cafe. Emily's hair was pulled into a sleek ponytail, her polished smile as bright as ever. "Claire," Emily said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I've been looking for you." "You have?" Claire replied, startled. Emily nodded, leaning in conspiratorially. "I wanted to tell you something." But it's a secret, okay? You can't tell anyone yet. Claire blinked, unsure where this was going. Uh, sure? Emily grinned. I'm going to propose to Ethan. The words hit Claire like a freight train. She stared at Emily, trying to process. You're what? Propose, Emily said, her eyes sparkling. I've been thinking about it for weeks, and it just feels right, you know? He's perfect, and I don't want to wait around for him to make the move. Girls can propose too. Claire forced a shaky smile. Yeah, I guess they can, but inside her stomach churned. I mean, you know him better than anyone, Emily continued, her voice light and bubbly. Do you think he'll say yes? Claire swallowed hard. I don't know, Emily. Maybe. Emily laughed. Well, I guess we'll find out soon enough. As Emily left the table, Claire sat frozen, her heart pounding. She clenched her fists, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. She couldn't let this happen, not without trying one last time. That night, Claire poured her soul into her next letter. I need to tell you the truth. I've been hiding behind these letters because I was scared, but I can't be afraid anymore. I love you, Ethan. I always have. If you feel the same, meet me tomorrow night, same spot. I'll wait for you. She folded the letter carefully, her hands trembling, and slipped it into his locker the next day. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Claire waited at the library wall, her heart racing. The chill of the night air bit at her skin, but she didn't move. Hours passed. She checked her phone repeatedly, hoping for a message, a call, anything, but it was silent. The campus grew quieter as night fell completely, the lampposts casting long shadows on the empty paths. Ethan didn't come. The following morning, Claire entered the lecture hall, her stomach heavy with dread. She froze in the doorway when she saw Ethan and Emily sitting together. Emily's arm was looped through Ethan's, and as Claire approached, Emily gave her a dazzling smile. Claire, she called, pulling Ethan closer. I wanted to tell you. Ethan and I are officially dating. Claire's chest tightened as she stared at them. Ethan's expression was harder to read. His smile seemed forced, and his eyes didn't meet hers. I told you because you're a close friend, Emily added, her voice dripping with sweetness. But keep it a secret for now, okay? We're not ready to tell everyone. Of course, Claire murmured, her voice hollow. Ethan glanced at her briefly, his expression unfamiliar. There was something in his eyes she couldn't place. Hesitation? Guilt? But he said nothing. Claire sat in her room that night, staring at her stack of unsent letters. Her mind whirled with questions. What happened? Did the letters mean nothing? She stopped writing. Days passed, then weeks, but Ethan didn't mention the letters or ask why they had stopped. It was as if they had never existed. Claire began to accept her fate. She had let herself believe in something that was never hers to begin with. Maybe I was wrong, she thought bitterly. Maybe I got carried away. She forced herself to smile when Ethan and Emily were around, but her heart broke a little more each time. The seasons changed, and life moved forward, but Claire's world felt frozen. A year had passed since that day in the lecture hall, and she had grown adept at hiding her pain. Ethan and Emily had become the campus's golden couple, their relationship seemingly perfect to anyone looking from the outside. Claire saw less of Ethan as the months went by. Their once inseparable bond had faded into occasional, surface-level conversations. She threw herself into her studies, internships, and part-time jobs, trying to fill the void he had left. As months turned into years, Ethan and Emily's relationship grew more serious. Ethan secured a high-paying job after graduation, while Emily focused on building her social media brand. It wasn't long before Emily began pushing for a wedding. The news of Ethan and Emily's wedding had spread like wildfire among their friends. Claire had smiled politely when she first heard, excusing herself from conversations and slipping away unnoticed. Over the months, she had distanced herself completely. The occasional small talk between her and Ethan had evaporated. It was easier this way, clean, detached, final. She told herself it was time to let him go, to stop chasing ghosts of what could never be. She focused on her work, her life, and the future she hoped to build for herself. But no matter how much she tried, the ache in her heart remained. Claire's evening was quiet, just as she liked it. She was curled up on her couch with a book when the knock on her door startled her. Frowning, she set the book aside and went to answer. Her breath caught in her throat when she saw who it was. Ethan stood there, a bottle of wine dangling loosely in his hand. He looked different, older, worn out, the vibrant energy that once surrounded him now a dim flicker. His eyes, tired and bloodshot, met hers with a weight she couldn't ignore. "Ethan," she said, stunned. "What are you doing here? Won't you invite me in?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Her heart ached at the sight of him. She stepped aside, letting him in. He walked in slowly, his posture slumped, as though the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. "I thought you were here to invite me to the wedding," she said softly, closing the door. He shook his head and gave a humorless laugh. "The last thing I want to talk about right now is the wedding." Claire frowned. "What's going on? Shall we talk over the drinks?" He sank onto the couch, setting the wine on the table and pouring for the two of them. He ran a hand through his hair as he finally spoke. "Emily's not. She's not the same person I thought she was," he admitted, his voice raw. "I don't know if she ever was." Claire sat beside him cautiously. "What do you mean?" He sighed heavily. "She's so materialistic. Everything has to be perfect, expensive, flashy. She doesn't understand. Hell, she doesn't care about what I want. She saw my salary and thought I was rolling in money, but most of it is tied up in stock options I can't even touch yet. When I told her that, she called me cheap." Claire's eyes widened. "She said that?" He nodded bitterly. "She doesn't care about us, Claire. She cares about the idea of us, about the image. The girl I fell in love with. It doesn't feel like she's there anymore." Claire's heart twisted. She had always known Emily wasn't the right person for him, but hearing it from Ethan himself felt like a knife twisting in her chest. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" "I didn't see it at first," he admitted. "Or maybe I didn't want to. I kept telling myself it would get better, that it was just pre-wedding stress. But now, I don't know." He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "I wish she was more like you, Claire." The words hit her like a thunderclap. Her breath caught, her hands curling into fists in her lap. Memories flooded her mind. The letters, the confessions she never made, the heartbreak of watching him fall for someone else. "Why not me, then?" she blurted before she could stop herself. Ethan turned to her, surprised. "What? Why not me?" she repeated, her voice trembling. "If you wanted someone like me, why didn't you choose me?" His lips parted as though to answer, but no sound came. Instead, he gave her a small, sad smile. "I wish," he started, but the words trailed off. Claire's chest tightened. His words felt like a half-hearted consolation, a reminder of what she could never have. She bit her lip, willing herself not to cry. What was so good about her in the first place? Ethan sighed. "Because of the letters she wrote to me," he said quietly. "They were so beautiful, so heartfelt. I didn't think she could be the one, but it was her." Her heart stopped. "What?" He rubbed his face, sighing. "I thought you were writing them. But when I showed up to meet the mystery girl, it was Emily standing there. I was confused, not knowing whether I was in love with the mystery girl or the mystery girl who I thought was you." Claire felt as though the floor had been ripped out from under her. "I thought I loved the person who wrote those letters. But now I'm not sure if I fell for the girl behind the words, or if I fell for the idea that it was you," Ethan admitted. Her throat tightened as tears blurred her vision. It all made sense now. His hesitation, Emily's sudden confidence, the way their relationship had unfolded. She had been robbed of her chance, stolen by someone who had no right to it. Ethan looked at her, his expression filled with regret. "I don't know what to do, Claire. I feel like I've been living someone else's life." "Leave her, Etten." Claire gritted her teeth, knowing well enough what kind of person he was. Ethan, for all his doubts about Emily, was still tied to her. The time they had spent together wasn't meaningless. Ethan would never abandon her, no matter how broken their relationship was. Gritting her teeth, Claire grabbed the wine bottle and took a long swig before tossing it aside. Ethan blinked, startled, as she leaned forward. "What are you?" he started, but his words were cut off as she kissed him. It was fierce and desperate, fueled by years of bottled-up emotion. Ethan froze for a moment, but then he gave in, pulling her closer. The weight of their shared pain, their confusion, and their unresolved feelings consumed them. Ethan woke with a pounding headache and a sense of disorientation. He blinked at the sunlight streaming through the window, his heart sinking as he realized where he was. Claire's apartment. Memories of the previous night flooded back. Her kiss, their confessions, the way they had lost themselves in each other. He turned, but the space beside him was empty. On the table, he found a letter, neatly folded. His stomach tightened as he opened it. I can't pretend anymore. I can't act like everything is fine. For the sanity of my heart and the clarity of my mind, I'm confessing the truth. I love you. I always have. If you feel the same, you know where to find me. Below the words was an address. Out of town. Ethan stared at the letter, his chest constricting. Today was his wedding day. The weight of the decision before him threatened to crush him. Stay or leave. There was no middle ground. Claire had made him feel the weight of her responsibility after last night. But the more he stared at the letter, the more he felt the need to clear something. Something that Claire hadn't done. Today, everything would be crystal clear. It was time to get ready for the wedding. The church was packed, its grand arches echoing with murmurs of anticipation. Rows of guests, mostly Emily's family and friends, filled the pews, their eyes trained on the couple standing at the altar. The scent of roses and lilies wafted through the air, mingling with the faint hum of the organ. Ethan stood beside Emily, his expression composed but distant, his thoughts a storm raging within. Emily glowed in her designer gown, her smile wide and polished, basking in the attention of the crowd. She looked every bit the perfect bride, but to Ethan, she felt like a stranger. The priest cleared his throat, his voice resonating as he began the ceremony. We are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace. Silence filled the room, save for the rustling of fabric as people shifted in their seats. Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. He could feel the weight of every gaze, the expectation thick in the air. The priest turned to Ethan. Do you, Ethan Carter, take Emily Dawson to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, as long as you both shall live? Emily looked at him, her eyes gleaming with triumph. But Ethan didn't respond. Ethan? Emily prompted, her voice a touch sharper, though her smile didn't falter. Ethan's lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he turned to the crowd, his voice steady but loud enough to command attention. I need to say something, he began, his tone carrying an edge of finality. The murmurs rose again, confusion spreading like wildfire. Emily's smile wavered. Ethan, what are you doing? She hissed through gritted teeth. Ethan ignored her, his gaze sweeping the room before settling back on her. Do you remember how our story started, Emily? He asked, his voice calm but pointed. Her brow furrowed slightly. Of course, I do, she replied with forced cheer. Good, Ethan said, his tone sharpening. Then tell them. Tell everyone the first line of the letter you wrote me. The letter that made me fall for you. The color drained from Emily's face. She faltered, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Ethan, she began, her voice shaky. It's been so long. I don't remember? Ethan interrupted, his voice cutting through hers like a blade. That's strange, because someone else does. Every word, every comma. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, Claire's final letter. The room stilled as he unfolded it, the sound of paper crinkling echoing in the silence. Emily's hands clenched at her sides, her facade crumbling. What are you trying to say? She demanded, her voice trembling. Ethan stepped closer, holding the letter aloft for all to see. I'm saying that this letter, this beautiful, heartfelt letter, wasn't yours. You lied, Emily. Gasps rippled through the church as the truth landed like a thunderclap. Emily's polished exterior cracked, her carefully curated image unraveling before their eyes. I didn't lie, she stammered, her voice rising in panic. Enough, Ethan said, his voice quiet but firm. He turned to her, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and resolve. I thought I loved you because of these letters, because I thought you were the one who understood me. But it was never you. And now I know the truth." He reached into his pocket again and pulled out the ring she had chosen, an extravagant, glittering symbol of everything wrong between them. He took her hand and placed the ring in her palm. "This is for the time we spent together," he said softly, his voice tinged with finality. "But this ends here?" Emily stared at him, her mouth agape, as he turned away from her. Gasps and murmurs filled the church as Ethan walked down the aisle, his steps steady, his heart racing. Outside, the crisp air hit him like a wave, grounding him as he pulled out Claire's letter one last time. The address she had left, a place out of town, burned in his mind. He looked at the horizon, knowing exactly where he needed to be. Without hesitation, he got into his car and drove, leaving behind the chaos and expectations of a life that was never truly his. When he arrived at the address, a small cafe by the lake, he saw her sitting by the window. Claire looked out at the water, her face calm but tinged with sadness. She turned as he entered, her eyes widening in surprise. "Ethan," she whispered, standing as he approached. "I'm sorry it took me so long," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm here now, and I know the truth." Claire stared at him, her heart pounding. "You missed your wedding. I wasn't supposed to be there," he replied, taking her hands in his. "I was supposed to be here. With you." Tears filled her eyes as the weight of his words sank in. "Ethan," he smiled, his thumb brushing against her knuckles. "I choose you, Claire. It's always been you." That's all for today. If you like the story, then hit that subscribe button for more.